I wanted to look at in depth is Exodus 16, 2 through 15. And so I'm trusting that everyone has the text and that you're familiar with the text and so forth. And so I wasn't going to spend time, reading it and like going through setting up the detail around what's happening. But whenever I approach a text to preach it, then I try to ask myself, like, I try to zoom out of the text and say, okay, what is happening? Like, where are we in the biblical narrative, and what is taking place with God's people? And so in this text in Exodus 16, 2 through 15, the people have essentially just come out of Egypt. And of course, in Egypt, they were slaves for 400 years, and they were making bricks and doing other things. The latter part of their time there, they were making bricks without straw, right? And so their work was even harder. And then through these divine miracles that God displays, they get brought out of Egypt, and then they cross the Red Sea on dry land, which is another huge divine miracle. And then now they're in the wilderness, and they're on their way to the promised land. And so it's not shortly after they've entered into the Red Sea that our text takes place. And so I know that's where I am. And then the second thing I always like to ask myself is like, well, who are the voices in this text? And so the text has a few voices. It has the voice of Moses and Aaron kind of speaking in unison, or kind of one after the other. And then the other voice is going to be the voice of God. And then the third voice is going to be the voice of the people, the congregation. And so when you read Exodus 16:2, it says that the whole congregation is gathered, and they start complaining to Moses and Aaron about not being enough food. And it's interesting that the text says the whole congregation, right? So like everybody's involved. They don't say like, there was the majority of the congregation, or it was everybody except for the few people who were wise and sensible. They just say everybody, the entire congregation, right? And so I'm sure there was a diversity of how, like strength, how committed people were to these arguments. I'm sure everyone wasn't as gung-ho as the person next to them. But from the vantage point of the narrator, or you could say from the vantage point of God, it was everyone. And so when I relate that to our climate change and our environmental challenges, I have to realize that everyone's involved. And essentially, like, everyone is, even us who are concerned about going green, and us who are shopping at farmers markets, and we are putting up solar panels and doing, driving Priuses and doing all these things that lessen the damage. There's still some part we play to the detriment. And so anyway, so it starts off by saying the whole congregation is complaining. And then after it notes that the whole congregation is complaining, what the congregation is doing is that they're saying that when they were in bondage, everything is good. And so now it becomes really important that you realize where you are in the text, because you're in a period of transition. And for human beings, transitions are really, really hard. I mean, transitions are almost unbearable for humans. And so we've had these great books over the years that talk about this, like Who Moved My Cheese, and these types of things that talk about how stressful change is. And so the people of Israel are experiencing the stress and the uncertainty of change and transition. And so while they're experiencing this, they begin to have fantasies of their bondage that are neither true nor the sentiment is not even accurate. And so they're saying, oh, when I was in Egypt, it was wonderful. It was this wonderful experience when I'm in Egypt. And when they were in Egypt, they were miserable, right? They were awful, which is why they were asking to be set free. And their last days in Egypt were their worst days in Egypt. And so now they're saying, oh, when I was in Egypt, I had all that I could stand and I had everything. Everything was great. And so stress makes people delusional. Stress makes us reimagine narratives in ways that fit whatever agenda that we have. And it strips away the humility also. It strips away. You know, if you want to be honest, you need a lot of humility if you want to have some honest dialogue. And their humility is stripped away. And so the crowd is complaining that they had everything they could ever imagine while they were slaves in Egypt, which is not true. And then they say, "You brought us out here to die," which is weird, right? I mean, they had experienced all these 10 plagues. They experienced God separating the water so they could walk across on dry land. And now that they get there, and they're a little bit hungry, and then now they're saying, "Oh, you brought us out here to die," which is neither true, it's not accurate, and it demonstrates that they have forgotten the benefit that they had just received. They've forgotten it. And it doesn't take much to forget. It doesn't take much to come up to reimagine what actually happened with some fictitious narrative. Doesn't take much to do that. And they're like a really shining star example of that. And they say it's better that we died than we'll be out here. And so this reminds me of so many of our friends who are refusing to wear face masks, right? I mean, they rather die than to wear a face mask, right? They rather just get a coronavirus and die and spread it to their family rather than wear a face mask, which is something that's so simple, so easy to do. And the children of Israel are saying, we rather die than you bring us out here and make us suffer like this. They would prefer death. And so if we're talking about climate change, right? And so we're talking about transitioning from the status quo into a new space, then we have to expect that there's going to be people who are going to reimagine the status quo better than it actually was. They're going to forget about all the great things, all the great progress that they've made to get to the point, to whatever point whatever successes are made, people are going to forget them along the way. And then before you reach the space of comfort, there are going to be people who are going to say, I'd rather die than to be comfortable. I prefer death than to go through this process of making of universal safety, of making it so that the world is better and that the earth is livable. They'll say, no, I'd rather die. I love the Bible because it shows the worst parts of humans. And so if you can be aware of the worst parts of humans, and I include myself in that, because I'm not immune from the worst parts of humans. And so I realized that, okay, I can do this. I have the tendency, I have the inclination to kind of follow these trends. And so I can guard against it. And I can ask other people to guard against it. All right, and so What else do I like to bring? What else sticks out to me in this text? Once the people start grumbling, I think in verses 7 and 8, when Moses and Aaron kind of respond, 2 times it says, "Who are we?" Moses and Aaron are talking to the congregation, and they say, "Who are we that you complain against us?" And he says it once in verse 7, and he says it again in verse 8. Who are we? Um, this is a question of identity. And so the question of identity is such an important question, because if you understand who you're griping to, if you understand who you are, if you understand who God is, then that's gonna shape the way that you interact, the way in which you identify people. And so the people are coming to Moses and Aaron, and they're complaining that they had great food in Egypt, and now they're hungry. And then part of the response of Moses and Aaron is to say, "Why are you grumbling against me? Who am I?" And it's important enough for Moses and Aaron to say it twice, because from their perspective, the people have forgotten who Moses and Aaron are. And then I think in verse 8, he says, you're not fighting against us, you're fighting against God. And so in our climate change, we have to remember who we are. We have to remember who God is, and we have to remember who the people that we're complaining to are. So we can't make them any better or any worse than they actually are, right? You want to give a sober assessment of who people are, and deal with them under that sober assessment. The last thing that has to be identified in the text is the food that God gives. And so God gives them manna from heaven, and God gives them quail. And so in the morning, of course, there's this whole thing about God testing them and God saying that they're going to be obedient, so they know who brought them out of Egypt. Now, by now, they should know who brought them out of Egypt. But there still seems to be some question after all that happened as to who brought them out of Egypt. And so God is kind of testing them to see if they can recognize that that is Him who brought them out of Egypt. But essentially, He gives them food that they do not recognize. And they look at it and they say, "What is it?" And then Moses says, "This is the bread that God provided for you." But the question that they ask, "What is it?" And of course, manna means "what is it," right? So in the Hebrew, if you were to break down manna, it means "what is it?" And so the solutions to our climate change, the solutions to our ecological crises, they're likely to be things that we may not understand fully. There might be something that is new to us that we haven't seen before. And so you have to at least be open to that. You have to be open to that. And so we can't expect every solution to be something that we've already thought about, something that we're familiar with, something that we know, something that our parents know and our cousins enjoy on the weekends. No, the solution could be something totally new, something totally unfamiliar, and you have to be open to that. And so I use this text a lot. This "what is it?" when we're working with groups about about their eating habits and eating new foods. And we're trying to encourage people to eat foods that are locally grown and to eat foods that are nutritious. But in order to eat nutritious food that is locally grown, then that means you have to broaden your palate, because people are used to going to the grocery store and getting whatever they like 12 months a year, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And that's part of the problem, right? Because there's a lot of pollution being spread and creating a food system that gives you whatever you want whenever you want it. And so one of the things that we've been trying to encourage people is to eat local, which essentially means eat somewhat seasonally. And so if you're going to eat enough volume of food seasonally, then you have to try foods you haven't had before, right? You have to try this new squash variety. You have to try these new eggplants. You have to try these new greens. You have to try these new things. And sometimes you give this to people, and the first thing they think is like, what is it? I don't know what this is. I have to now learn how to cook this new dish. And the point is that when you encounter something that you don't know, it allows you the opportunity to be imaginative. And so if you read the midrash around this verse, what is it? You know, some of the ancient rabbis would say that this food tasted like whatever it is that the people wanted it to taste like. And so if they wanted it to taste like something that was divine and heavenly, then it tasted like that. If they wanted it to taste like something that was nasty and despicable, then it tasted like that. It was all about the strength and breadth of their imagination. And so when I encounter a new thing, if I want it to be, if my imagination wants that new thing to be new and great and wonderful, then I put my efforts and my energy into creating something that reflects that. But if I dismiss it upon entry, then my effort is also extremely minimal, and it's kind of defeatist, and it's not likely to be desirable for me and for anyone else. So is that my 15 minutes? Okay.